When I was able to speak at the Peace and Freedom Party convention in Sacramento this past weekend, I made the following remarks, and this is just a portion of it. This year marks the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Black Panther Party in the fall of 1966. Some may want to point out the imperfections of the Black Panthers and their leaders. The incredible fact that not only were the Panthers able to do so much, survive so long, and do so in spite of violent and ever-increasing state repression, the Panthers, with minimal support from the organized left back then, evolved into the most ideologically revolutionary expression of the Black liberation movement. As we celebrate that tremendous anniversary this year, let us be sure to remember the most enduring and the most painful lesson that we learned from that period. We believe that the ability of the FBI's COINTELPRO and all the forces of the racist capitalist state to jail, murder, and otherwise disrupt and crush the Panthers reflected the unfortunate reality that the political movement was at best divided over supporting the Panthers against this repression, and at worst, did not do nearly enough to prevent the Panthers from being politically isolated. When liberation movements are isolated, it is far easier for the capitalist state to carry out its dirty work with the aim of weakening the overall revolutionary movement. Workers' World Party believes that the Black Lives Matter movement represents even more than a continuation of the age-old struggle against racist police terror. Indeed, we believe the Black Lives Matter uprising, which is international in scope, reflects the awakening of a section of the working class that is being transformed by capitalist globalization and technology. There is an economic and social basis for the increase in police repression and murder in Black and brown and indigenous communities. It is the same economic and social basis for mass incarceration. So I just want to stop those remarks and really ask the question, what do these remarks have to do with the origins of Black August, which happened in 1970 and 71, and today's Black Lives Matter movement? Everything, despite almost a 50-year difference. Class struggle may take on different forms, but the essence is the same when it comes to oppressed peoples, and that is their quest for national liberation and ultimately for socialism. Both Jonathan Jackson and George Jackson were individuals who reflected the revolutionary period just as the Vietnamese were in the process of defeating the military might of U.S. imperialism, and just as the Black Panther Party was evolving into the most influential expression of self-determination for Black people, and also internationalism for other sectors of the movement. The prisons were very much a part of this revolutionary period because they played a dual role of being concentration camps for the poor, but also schools for developing revolutionaries. Just take the life of George Lester Jackson. Like many Black youth today, George Jackson was 18 years old when he was convicted for second-degree robbery and received a 1-year to life sentence in the California prisons. He spent most of his prison life in solitary confinement. So what did he do during these 23-and-a-half-hour day, this hell that he was forced to live in? Well, he says that books became his best friend. But not just any books, but the teachings of Marx, Lenin, Mao, Fanon, and other revolutionary thinkers while he was in prison. Turning to Marxist thinkers, Jackson stated that he felt, quote, redeemed, and confessed, another quote, I have been in rebellion all my life. I just didn't know it, end quote. He eventually proclaimed himself to be a revolutionary communist. due to the fear that the prison authorities had for Jackson being more than just a political prisoner, but also a leader of the Black Panther Party, who was winning over other prisoners, not just in California, but around the country, to a revolutionary perspective. He was eventually assassinated on August 21st, 1971, at the age of 29. At George Jackson's funeral, Huey P. Newton spoke the following words, and I wish I could read the whole thing, because it's really worth it, but I just want to read. He gave the main eulogy at George Jackson's funeral. And this is from Blood in My Eye. I really want to encourage people to read this book. It was George Jackson's, he finished this book just 1 week before he was killed. And this is from Huey Newton. When I went to prison in 1967, I met George, not physically, but through his ideas, his thoughts, and words. He was at Soledad Prison at the time. I was at California Penal Colony. George was a legendary figure throughout the prison system, where he spent most of his life. I met George through his spirit. Shortly after learning about him, I got word through the prison grapevine that he wanted to join the Black Panther Party. At his request, he was made a member of the People's Revolutionary Army with the rank of General and Field Marshal. He was put in charge of the prison recruiting and was asked to go on with his life as a revolutionary example, which was the most important thing that one can ever do, because that can never be killed. I say that the legendary figure is also a hero. George Jackson was my hero. He set a standard for prisoners, political prisoners, for people. He showed the love, the strength, the revolutionary fervor that's characteristic of any soldier for the people. He inspired prisoners whom I later encountered to put his ideas into practice, and so his spirit became a living thing. Today I say that although George's body has fallen, his spirit goes on, because his ideas live. And we will see that these ideas stay alive because they'll be manifested in our bodies and in these young Panthers' bodies who are our children. So it's a true saying that there will be revolution from one generation to the next. This was George's legacy, and he will go on. He will go on into immortality because we believe that the people will win. We know the people will win as they advance generation upon generation. We should take note that about 3 weeks after George Jackson was assassinated, on September 9th, the heroic Attica Rebellion, prison rebellion, erupted in upstate New York, in which our party, through its mass organization, the Prisoner Solidarity Committee, played a pivotal role in showing solidarity. One of our leading members, Tom Soto, was invited to be part of the negotiating team on behalf of the prisoners inside the prison. And hope other comments who were more, in tune with that period can talk more about that. Many of the leaders of that rebellion acknowledged the inspiring role that George played in their lives and in this revolutionary act that was drowned in blood by then Governor Nelson Rockefeller's stormtroopers. Jackson's younger brother, Jonathan, as we just saw, just 17 years old, was slaughtered in a hail of bullets, along with black prisoners William Christmas and James McLean, on August 7, 1970, at a Marin County courthouse in an effort to free George by taking a judge hostage. And Rochelle McGee, who has been in prison for almost 50 years, I think, survived the massacre and is still in the California prisons today. While others in the traditional left movement attacked this bold action initiated by Jonathan Jackson as being, quote, adventurous and, quote, ultra-left, our party took a more thoughtful position in defense of this action, which was all about exposing and challenging the racist state apparatus, including the courts and the prisons. In a tribute to Jonathan and his comrades, Fred Goldstein wrote a powerful and moving commentary in the August 20th, 1970 issue of Workers' World, and it was entitled The Heroes of San Rafael. I just want to read a portion of it, which I feel more than anything reflects the revolutionary period of that time amongst the revolutionaries from the most oppressed. This is from Fred's article. In a flash of revolutionary daring, the heroes of San Rafael breached the fortress of the enemy, where he thought he was impregnable. In the courts, they assailed that onerous organ which has been held sacred and inviolable by ruling classes throughout history. Since the dawn of class society, this institution has served the rich, the exploiters, as the arena of class discipline, where the poor are held to account for every act of rebellion, be it large or small, personal or political, against exploitation and class domination. In all areas of life, there is no place where the master class has grown so accustomed to submission as in the court. Therein lies a great political, moral, and psychological victory won for the Black liberation struggle at San Rafael. Political indelibly into the minds of thousands of yet anonymous revolutionaries who cannot but be inspired by such a heroic exploit. This example alone has already prepared a future augmentation of the forces of liberation. Psychologically, the slave masters have been terrified by the boldness and invocative tactical conception. The tension in the ruling class must increase tremendously as a result. No court is safe anymore. Blind passivity and fatal acceptance by its victims can no longer be taken for granted by the enemy. Every prison has become a veritable cadre school of the oppressed. The courts will have to become armed camps. The bourgeoisie will have to show the people its teeth in every, quote, hall of justice across the country. And just in conclusion, the tactic of San Rafael flows directly from the present stage of the struggle. The revolution, the war of liberation has sunk into the bones of the people. There is universal desire to struggle, but the people have not yet created an army capable of dealing the enemy blow for blow on an equal basis, capable of smashing the power of the oppressor, end quote. So when we compare the revolutionary period of the 60s and 70s with what's going on today, we should examine what is different and what is the same, both inside the U.S. and globally. And I hope we can do this a lot during the discussion from an economic and political point of view. But what hasn't changed is the fact that globalization or no globalization, the repressive state, that is the police, the courts, and prisons, remain a constant reminder that class society exists as long as capitalism exists, that white supremacy still exists as long as capitalism exists, and repression exists as long as capitalism exists, no matter what the changes in form or tactics. In conclusion, comrades and friends, the revolutionary movement needs to step up its efforts to show solidarity with the most of the oppressed, not make the same mistakes that were made when the Panthers were decimated. And when I say solidarity with the most oppressed, I mean black and brown, indigenous, immigrants, Muslims, women, LGBTQ, the most vulnerable sectors of our society when it comes to, the repression. Black and brown youth continue to take the lead in the fight back against the racist war as they spontaneously rebel in the streets. Just recently in Milwaukee, following the police murder of Seville Smith last Saturday, along with the Baltimore Rebellion in 2015, following the murder of Freddie Gray, and the Ferguson Rebellion in 2014, following the murder of Michael Brown. And the youth of Milwaukee are still under a 10 p.m. military-like curfew, but that hasn't stopped them from coming together during the daytime in Sherman Park to strategize and to continue their organizing efforts, because we know what's underneath, the police repression and the militarization of the police are just devastating conditions for black and brown people, all over the country. In Milwaukee, they were talking about no jobs for the youth, terrible housing, just the public education is, funds have been slashed. All of this is what, black youth are dealing with in Milwaukee, one of the most segregated cities in the country. The global changes in the capitalist system render larger and larger sections of the oppressed working class as expendable as far as the system is concerned. Since capitalism no longer needs their labor, they are subject to murder and prison, in effect a war that threatens the very survival of black and brown people. And because of the prevalence of police murder and occupation, this can many times overshadow mass incarceration. There are over 2 million of our class in these concentration camps, the world's largest prison population. Many wind up in prison or jails for the so-called crime of being poor and with people with mental disabilities. But many of them end up being revolutionaries, like the Panthers United for Revolutionary Education on death row, or George Jackson. On September 9th, a nationwide prison strike will be happening on the 45th anniversary of the Attica uprising that we should pay serious attention to. And I think the PPA is actually taking this up too in terms of support. And we need to, again, provide as much support to our sisters and brothers, yes, sisters too, inside the walls. Apparently, it must have, this talk of a prison strike must be striking a chord all around the country, because just recently Sharon called me to tell me that a prisoner, she heard from one of the prisons in Pennsylvania on behalf of a prisoner who gets our newspaper, stating that they were returning the newspaper to us because it mentioned a September 9th strike. Yeah. And they couldn't have that, being spread around. So this is a sign that the prison authorities are fearful of this strike, no matter what form it takes. So just ending, there's so much more to say and learn about these extraordinary, self-sacrificing revolutionaries, George and Jonathan Jackson, who reflected the revolutionary period that propelled many of us, including myself, into the struggle for revolutionary socialism and the party. So let's do everything we can to keep alive the legacy of Black August, including the fighting spirit of George and Jonathan Jackson, by urging the movement to defend and support, in words and deeds, the Black Lives Matter struggle, which is an extension of the struggle for Black power 50 years ago. As the martyred Fred Hampton once said, "You can kill a revolutionary, but you can't kill the revolution." Black Lives Matter, long live international solidarity.